Welcome to the August 10th call for the EMS Interoperability Task Force. Over the past few months, we've been going through various topics related to information sharing between EMS and the rest of healthcare. The last couple months, last month especially, we really dug into the sequence diagram that illustrates the workflow and the exchange of information between EMS and the rest of the healthcare system. For the next few months, we're going to actually dive into specific pieces of that sequence diagram and focus on one piece at a time to understand and discuss the data standards that would be used to support that step of the information sharing. So we're going to get started with that. This will be the first call where we dive into one of those pieces. Before we start in, just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the NEMSIS YouTube channel. If there's anything that comes up in the meeting that you need to have stripped from the recording, just let us know. Also, a couple sessions ago, we changed to a more moderated format. We would ask that when you'd like to contribute something to say, that you raise your hand. We hope that this will make it so that everyone has the opportunity, if they've got something to say, to provide their input and not worry about if they need to jump in or cut someone off. So yeah, with that as a basis, let's go ahead and get going. So as I mentioned, we've covered lots of topics so far this year, and we're starting into the specific standards and profiles that are used for various steps of the interaction. For today's call, we have decided to focus on this EMS-to-hospital information flow. So we're kind of stepping right into the middle of the sequence diagram. And I'll give you in a second here kind of an orientation of where we are in the context. In some ways, this is going to be our most difficult step because we've got several alternatives for sharing that information, and we need to kind of whittle through those and figure out as a group what we should kind of put our efforts towards. So we'll take a look at that. So today's topic, standards and profiles to use in the EMS to hospital information flow. I've got a bunch of questions for today that we're going to get to as we go through the session. So we're not going to answer these at this moment, but these are the questions that I want to put on the table for today. We're going to look at several different content standards or profiles. There's the HL7 CDA EMS Patient Care Report. We're going to look at the IHE Paramedicine Care Summary. We're going to look at two documents in HL7 Consolidated Clinical Document Architecture. That'll be the Continuity of Care Document, or CCD, and Unstructured Document. I want to also address the question of, you know, we're kind of looking at EMS sending the full report to the hospital, but what about when EMS needs to send just a little bit of information, like a specialty team alert or an ECG, a rhythm strip, or a set of vitals or a narrative? How would that be accomplished? And then we'll kind of wrap up today with what are the resources that we need to develop to help move all of this forward. Okay, so to give the context, this is the brief high-level paramedicine care flow sequence diagram. And in this high-level flow, we're looking at this step in the middle where EMS pushes its transport summary to a hospital. If we dive into the detailed flow, the sequence diagram indicates that the IHE Paramedicine Care Summary would be the content standard or content profile to use for sharing the EMS data with the hospital. So we're going to look at that, but as I mentioned in the questions list, we're going to look at lots of other things that are probably being used today. We're even going to touch on HL7 V2, and I want to make sure that we touch on HL7 FHIR resources as well. Okay, before we dive into each of those, I want to just share a little bit of background on HL7 clinical document architecture. I'm hoping that for many of you, this is well-known information by this point, but there might be a few of you for whom this is new information. The HL7 Clinical Document Architecture, or CDA, has 3 levels, what you could maybe call maturity levels, I guess. Clinical Document Architecture provides an architecture for exchanging documents that have healthcare information, so clinical documents. And the CDA standard, there's an XML schema for it, and it provides a well-defined header. So you get lots of metadata that's all structured. So you know where the document came from and kind of that context, the provenance of it. And it also has well-structured information about what document type you're sending or receiving. So that's all structured. But then the content of the document, there's 3 levels. Level 1 CDA is unstructured content. So the example here typically would be something like a PDF that just simply gets encoded and embedded in this XML clinical document. So you still got a structured header, you know what kind of document this is, but then you just get PDF data as the content. Level 2 is unstructured content, but it's within structured sections. So there will be, for example, a vital signs section. And then within the vital signs section, you've just got unstructured content. It might be text or HTML, PDF, whatever, or an image. And then level 3 is fully structured content. So you've got not just that there's a vital signs section, but you've got the individual vital signs all in structured content. So you can pull out a systolic blood pressure or a diastolic blood pressure, all structured. So that's clinical document architecture from a high level. And then I want to also just cover consolidated clinical document architecture, or CCDA. This was an effort led by ONC several years ago to say, okay, we've got clinical document architecture and we've got a whole bunch of different document types that have been standardized. But can we pick a few that we ask everyone to implement and prioritize this list of document types? And so the CCDA is a list of 12 document types that are widely adopted. And so these 12 that you see on the screen here, those are the document types from CDA that are considered to be part of the consolidated CDA. Okay, I want to pause there. And I especially appreciate anyone on the call who might have additional insights to offer about CDA and CCDA as just kind of this foundational piece before we jump into looking at some specific standards and profiles that EMS would use. And John Hodgson had a question in the chat. Is there a unique identifier for EMS included in the CDA? And I don't know the answer to that. So if anyone has that answer, that'd be great too. So any additional, either answer to that question or additional comments at this point?
And I also wanted to point out that the CCDA is the current standard that is required for certified EHR technology, starting back in the 2014 edition of EHR certification. So it's had quite some time to be a requirement through the ONC regulations and implemented in most of the settings today on the hospital, ambulatory, inpatient side, and certified health IT side.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is Matt from No2. To clarify that even further, it's the number 3 that the continuity of care document specifically that's required in a specific version of it. A lot of these other notes and summaries that you see here are generally optional to share, especially on the major networks and frameworks. So you'll be kind of hit or miss. The major EMRs will send them. A lot of other groups will not. So just to set expectations appropriately there, with what you will get and what you won't get in certain situations.
That's good to know. Thanks, Matt. So the continuity of care document is the one that is most widely supported.
Right, and that's that patient summary. A lot of these, the patient summary has all the patient level details like problems, allergies, medications, et cetera. A lot of these individual documents that you see elsewhere are more encounter specific. So whenever a patient shows up, this particular piece gets documented. And so these are going to include the notes and like the care plans and H&Ps and stuff that you see on the screen, but it won't be that patient level document that you will get nearly every time you query or get sent a message.
Okay.
I would say there's some caveats to that based on which EMR those CCDAs are being sourced from. And what we found in our experience here at Wishon is minimum necessary is typically the data that you will get. So if you're looking for additional information, assuming that information should exist, it may, but that standard is essentially a minimum data set to meet the meaningful use stage 3 requirements. I don't know, Matt, if you would oppose to that, but that's
I think it's a good point. Like if you really look at US CDI version 1, that's generally what you're going to get sent, to your point, Steve. If they hold additional information that could be in the document, it's not necessarily there. I think that's a great point.
Okay, so keeping in mind that today's call is about the sending of the EMS information to the hospital, I want to zoom in on that question a little more and say, how widely are these different document types supported by systems that would be consuming them as opposed to producing them?
Yeah, as far as consuming, everything on this list, the mid to large EMRs generally support in terms of hospital EMRs. So I don't see anything on this list that's concerning as far as what we would be able to send.
Okay. Yeah, so if they received, for example, a transfer summary, it might not be something they send very often or even send at all, but if they received it, they would have the wherewithal to
right. And typically when you're pushing information, what you would want to do is not only push that encounter specific piece, like a transfer summary or a progress note or something like that, depending on what template you want to use. You would send that patient level CDA as well. And so a lot of groups combine those documents, and we could talk about exactly how to do that, but you could just send both too.
And Matt, wouldn't you include the LOINC code attached to the transfer summary so it was easily ingested by the EHR?
Yeah, Catherine, that's a good point in making sure.
Yeah, that and only because I just got off another call where we were discussing that.
Yep. Yeah, and each of these will have their own individual link codes, and each of the sections will have their individual link codes. But yes, that's extremely important in making sure that the other side knows exactly what they're receiving and how to adjust it.
And Joshua, if we could help as a community encourage people to adopt to sending and querying for the note that was most appropriate for the use case, that would help the clinical community, because the continuity of care document became somewhat of a dumping ground. And so the information is not always it's not always very useful or efficient for clinical providers to review. And so if we're talking about EMS, let's pick the document type that would be most useful for that clinical community to consume, and then perhaps refine what is optional and what's required. And I don't remember who it was. Somebody said a minute ago that transfer summary is the one most often employed. So I think that sounds reasonable.
Great. So we're going to come back to this slide actually in a few minutes and address exactly that question, Catherine. The question will be, okay, which ones should we kind of coalesce around and push forward for EMS to use to send their data? So thank you for that. Let's see, Andrea said in the chat, the document type is something that defines the document, but when profiled, it can include EMS specific sections as long as it also contains the sections that are defined as required by the document type. So we're going to see that here in a sec, I think, as we look at some of these options we have. So let's look at we're going to look at the EMS patient care report from HL7. Then we're going to look at the IHE Paramedicine Care Summary profile, and let's see, and then we're going to come back to that slide about Consolidated CDA. Okay, so the Emergency Medical Services Patient Care Report implementation guide in HL7 is part of HL7 Clinical Document Architecture Revision 2. It was first published, I think, 2014 or somewhere in there, based on NEMSIS 3.4. It was an effort led by the NEMSIS Technical Assistance Center to get that document published. The current status is that it is active. It's in its third release, which was May of last year. It supports or references back to NEMSIS, both versions 3.4 and 3.5. And it is within clinical document architecture referencing HL7 version 3. So we're talking about the XML-based architecture. I've drawn the kind of the, I guess I'll call it the UML diagram on the right there. So the EMS patient care report is a set of constraints upon a clinical document. And a clinical document is the kind of the base document type of clinical document architecture. And this is a level 3 document. So the EMS patient care report is fully parsable discrete data, not a wrapper for a PDF or something, but level 3. So that's the EMS patient care report, released, like I say, originally about 2014, the latest release, May 2022. The questions that I want to bring up here are like, what do we do with this one? Do we start using it? Do we encourage people to use it? If hospitals receive this document, will they know what to do with it? You know, what are we seeing out in the field today, and where do we want to go? So what are your thoughts, everyone, on this?
Joshua, I would have to go back to my stakeholders in Texas and ask them what they're saying. Intellectually, I think that they could ingest it, but I don't know. And I don't know who's receiving what. But I'm glad to do that.
Okay, thanks.
So for our agency, I'm hospital-based EMS. They accept our PDF documents. They're very wary of discrete data points right now. So we may run into some challenges where it's not a matter of capability, it's a matter of willingness.
So your hospital prefers to receive a PDF or something non-discrete data elements.
We're pushing towards some specific data points, so things like meds, so it goes to the MAR, so certain interventions for tracking. But for now, they just want the PDF document. They have pushed back about some of the discrete data points.
Interesting.
We're finding the same in Wisconsin.
Really?
Yep.
I don't know. I'll ask in Texas. I know that when we began talking about other CDAs and things like that, like Discharge Summary CDAs, the technical teams thought the clinicians wanted a PDF, but when we surveyed the clinicians across Texas, they were very adamant that they wanted something that was digestible in their EHR so that they could take advantage of the different functionality.
And for those that don't want to receive discrete data, is it because there's the extra step of having to figure out how to style that and present it to a user in a human viewable way, or do they have some kind of security related concern about it? Or
from the discussions I've had with them, it's a mix of security as well as clinical impact validation to make sure it's coming across when it's coming across, so it's impacting things in an appropriate time and fashion.
so if they have discrete data, then the implication is that it's being inserted into their EMR record, and that's where they want to make sure it's high quality before that happens.
Something to that effect, yes.
Okay.
And there's an element also of, how exactly you ask for something or how you send something as well. So if you send a CCDA, they're likely able to ingest the structured pieces of the summary. And they're probably required to as well to some degree, especially for things like med reconciliation as part of just general certification criteria. However, if you send them a PDF, there is no, then requirement to do any kind of reconciliation or things like that. And so some of that could be coming out of tensions from, different areas within the enterprise. It is easier to get a PDF, but it's more useful to have discrete data. But then there's more to that in terms of how that data is reconciled, what kind of process they use to that, and the overhead that goes along with that. So that's something I think we can tease out through these conversations as well, to ensure that the data that's EMS is sending is useful to the clinicians, as Catherine was mentioning.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
This is Greg. The other thing you have to realize is the large EMRs don't have a spot for EMS data. So if I'm a paramedic and I bring a chest pain patient to the hospital and I gave aspirin and the patient has history, they don't have a thing in the EMR says, did EMS give aspirin? And that's the other problem, is that there's not a landing spot for some data. And the hospitals, if you can imagine what a change management system looks like for a health system in a large EMR, the steps has to go through to get that approved. They assess that based off the value of that change. And is that really important? Now, and Neil has a great example. We can send data over to a specific thing like a MAR. The challenge is that, are you going to train people to look for the EMS? Did the EMS give aspirin, and where is it over here? And that's the largest problem that I have found, is that a lot of people ask for discrete data, but they don't know where to put it.
Okay, so then if they get something like a PDF, they've got a spot to put it. It just gets kind of attached, right?
Well, the PDF has the holistic picture of the EMS run sheet.
Yeah.
I think ideally it would be if you had a case, a kind of a care bundle or a case. So if you had a cardiac case, then you could throw in some things like, did EMS give aspirin? Or a better example is maybe a cardiac arrest. Was there bystander CPR, bystander AD, CPR, mechanical CPR? Those kind of things to help paint the picture from a clinical continuity care. But at the end of the day, the doctors, I think they're just going to start treating the patient, and it might be after the fact. But again, that's just my personal opinion as a paramedic. But the big challenge is through the lens of a health system, looking at what is the valuable data to them for patient continuity care and patient safety.
Okay, thanks.
So the trick for you and the stakeholders is to urge the health systems to see the value and the importance of what EMS can do in the field, and the safety of continuity of care, custodial care from one endpoint to another, from EMS to hospital. And they have to see that from a near miss or a risk mitigation standpoint.
Okay, yeah. Neil, did you have your hand raised?
So the one other thought that just came to me is we use Epic as our EMR. And as we look at how the health system looks at the different encounters, I think they may almost need to be starting to look at it as a different encounter. So they're feeding into the same structure, but they're not doing that right now. Just to kind of speak to Greg's points and from a different perspective, that it goes in, it sits there, and they don't know the investment to put it in and build a whole new system around these events. And then to make it accessible through the same way they would for a consult for another specialist or other interactions.
Okay. Let's see, Andrea said there's an option for a section level import for hospitals to take things like history, allergies, and medications while not consuming the EMS specific sections like scene information. So yeah, there's, I mean, it sounds like, there's enough flexibility within the standards to support kind of this mix of structured and unstructured data to some extent, that there's certain things they could parse out. We can still provide something that would be like a, that PDF type summary, but also start providing some parsable data.
Right. And I also want to back up and just kind of say it out loud, the fact that these folks can ingest and display a regular CDA and have ingestible discrete data. And the fact that a viewer of that data doesn't mean they have to ingest everything, but at the same time, making it available for them to ingest if they want is a nice extra step, and you can do both.
Okay.
Just to be clear, you don't have to just send discrete data or just send a narrative or just send a PDF. You can do both.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Well, let's move to the. I don't know if we answered the question fully on the HL7 EMS PCR, but I want to move to the Paramedicine Care Summary and talk about this. So this is an IHE profile. It's currently in trial implementation. The published version that you can get to from the IHE website is version 1.1, which was dated September 2018. There is a version 2.0. There is a file posted on IHE's web server. It's just not linked to from any web pages anywhere. And that's from 2021, January 21. The September version, 2018 version of it references NEMSIS 3.4. The unpublished 2.0 revision covers NEMSIS 3.4 and 3.5. The Paramedicine Care Summary covers both HL7 version 3 as well as FHIR for how you might actually transfer that content to someone. I've shown on the right here kind of the inheritance that the Paramedicine Care Summary has. It is constraints upon an IHE medical summary, which is a constrained IHE medical document, which complies with HL7 CDA level 2. So level 2 is structured sections, but then within the sections, unstructured data. The IHE medical summary constrains the medications, allergies, and problems sections to level 3. So those sections have to be structured data in order to be an IHE medical summary. The other sections might be unstructured. So the Paramedicine Care Summary inherits that, and then it further structures everything. And Andrea, you might be able to tell us, I don't remember offhand, if it is completely structured or if it still has some unstructured options to it. And then within the Paramedicine Care Summary, there's a complete report. And then within that is a clinical subset report that has been identified as some minimum data that would be shared from EMS to a hospital. So Andrea, do you know on if everything in the Paramedicine Care Summary is level 3 or if there's some level 2 stuff as well?
So we have 3 options for implementing it, which includes discrete data import options, and those discrete data import options have additional options for discrete data for structuring things like injury and cardiac events, and a few other, one other, I think, and quality to be able to send over structured data, like the observation level. But the profile itself, you have the option to do view PDF to a section into a discrete, but I believe it all can go down to a discrete level import piece.
Okay.
We're just inheriting that level 3 from medical summary for those 3 sections.
Okay, so so everything's specified down to level 3, but still allowing unstructured data to flow as well. So someone could send a Paramedicine Care Summary with all structured data, but also embed, a PDF or an image or something. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So kind of getting back to that point we were talking about a minute ago with, hey, we can do both. We can give the hospitals structured and unstructured data and let them take what they want, perhaps.
Yeah, you could do, like you can send out something that is discretely defined, level 3, and then the hospital can say, no, I just want these sections, and the rest of it as a PDF.
Okay. So I want to open this one up to the group, the Paramedicine Care Summary. What are our opportunities here for implementing this? If we do implement it, do the hospitals currently have the ability to receive it and parse it? What do we as an industry want to do in regards to the Paramedicine Care Summary profile? So, thoughts on that?
Can I clarify something real quick about the difference between the complete report and the clinical subset? So the clinical subset was put together because there was a comment in the committees about, if you're going to send the report, it's likely not going to be completed by the time that you're sending the information in. And there are a bunch of things that the ED staff might not be interested in being able to take in, so they don't want to dig for the history allergist medication. And so the clinical subset was divided out into saying, okay, these are what we with the committee at that time believe healthcare providers would be interested in knowing. And then the complete report is the discrete data for the entire, basically almost the entirety of the NEMSIS report, with exception with some of the payer information or the billing pieces that the hospital may want to be able to parse later for their quality measurement needs. So that's why it's split in two like that, and it kind of helps direct the question of how much information do we want to send in versus the complete report. Kind of like that question of a CCDA being a kind of like a dumping ground. You don't want to have this repeated in the Paramedicine Care Summary as well.
Okay, thanks. Maybe let me ask this. The Paramedicine Care Summary is constraints upon an IHE Medical Summary. How widely is the IHE Medical Summary supported by hospitals in terms of them being able to consume one?
Is that a question for me or just for others?
For anyone, yeah.
As far as I'm aware, most systems are able to consume a medical summary.
Yeah, I don't know of an EMR that is not, actually.
Okay, so that's good to know. So they can understand a medical summary, which obviously there's things in there that medications, allergies, problems. They're going to understand all that because that's part of a medical summary. And then, help me understand, since the Paramedicine Care Summary then provides further constraints upon a medical summary, what's the additional effort, if any, for a hospital system to understand and parse a Paramedicine Care Summary? Is it the case that there's certain sections that they're going to have no problem with because it's part of an IHE Medical Summary, and then there's going to be additional data that they maybe don't know what to do with, or how does that look?
So just to back up a second, I think there's two pieces to that you said. Number one, there's an understanding and there's a parsing. So understanding is really just digesting the narrative, in my opinion. And that is what clinicians are looking at 90% plus of the time, is just that human readable format of the medical summary, which includes all that information broken out into sections. The parsing is where you get into, actually extracting out medications by NDC code, allergies, problems, et cetera, by ICD-10 code, that sort of thing, and either adjusting them in the chart or laying them side by side onto other problems and allergies and medications and things like that. It's a little harder. A lot of EMRs can do that, and it'll very likely be the same as long as those actual code sets are the same and the section IDs are the same, which I think they are. But in general, to answer your question from a broad perspective, they can see the whole thing because they're going to see the narrative, and that's consistent across document types. And so they'll be able to, at the very least, read that information. The benefit of having a specific paramedicine care summary is, number one, they have that code section that Catherine was talking about to understand exactly what they're looking at and from whom, which makes a really big difference in, like, when you're sending a run summary like that they can easily identify that it is that summary and look at it very quickly. That's important. And number two, if they do parse that information, they know where it's coming from. So I don't anticipate a whole lot of extra effort, but identifying the actual document is on the other side and coding to make sure that they can ingest the run summary specifically will just help them identify exactly what it is. Either way, I do believe most hospital electronic medical records will be able to show that narrative, that summary to the clinician regardless. I know that was a lot of words. Does that make sense?
That was really helpful. Yes, thank you.
And Joshua, I mean, I agree with Matt. And I would like to add that in the conversations we've had, a lot of the hesitation to bring foreign data in discreetly has to do with data provenance.
Okay.
That the origination of that data existing in an instance of an EHR that's foreign discreetly is not broadly pulled in. Now, I mean, it is, there's risks associated with that when data is provided to a health plan from a HEDIS quality measure perspective. Like, if there's data that's combined from a foreign system, that creates data integrity issues. And then the ability to just discretely ingest that data requires parsing. And if you don't have like a diameter health solution that's parsing this information like in real time, I think that's another barrier. How do I extract elements? What we've heard is that's not native or native to the EMR. There has to be some solution to parse that data and then find how that's crosswalked from an EMS CCD in version 3 to the appropriate table in an EMR. Last thing is LOINC codes. We're doing a lot of work with digital quality measures in health plans. Many of the organizations we're using don't use the standard LOINC codes. They are using internal, I can't say proprietary, but internal codes. They're not using standard LOINC codes yet. So while that's important, yes, I would not shy away from that or deviate if that's the standard for NMSIS and EMS. But health systems, hospitals, they're, from what we're seeing, they're not using a standard.
Okay, so then in that case, we identify all the correct standard LOINC codes to use in the paramedicine care summary. The data gets sent to the hospital, but the hospital hasn't really implemented that. They're just using their own codes internally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then they're still not able to parse it, not because of our lack of standardization, but their lack of standardization, I guess.
I would say, and I'm not speaking for all health plans, but that's been our observation when working with, I'm sorry, not health plans, health systems, when working with health plans and the data that's sourced from health systems, hospitals, et cetera.
Okay. I wanted to mention that the paramedicine care summary as an IHE profile, IHE profiles go through trial implementation before they move to a final text. And in order to move from trial to final, they need at least 3 vendors who pass connectathon testing on that profile. So that's what we would have ahead of us. In addition, of course, to actually making changes to the profile, refining it, getting corrections taken care of and all that. But in addition to that, we would need at least 3 vendors who would pass testing on the profile as well to move it to final.
And you know, that's one of the opportunities in front of us as we've assembled this interoperability task force. We've made some headway bringing EMS to the table. If we can modernize this profile, have it aligned with the current ONC regulations, it'll be much more useful for everyone across the board. And the best way to do that is having the folks at the table when this is written and updated. So that's right where we're at right now. And so we're looking to get some of the expertise from this group and others to get us moving that forward.
Any other thoughts on the paramedicine care summary? Just jotting down a note here. Okay, so I want to loop back to the CCDA document list. I've highlighted the continuity of care document and the unstructured document, but as a result of today's discussion, it sounds like there are others I should highlight. The question I want to kind of come around to here is, we've got the HL7 EMS patient care report CDA document, but it's not on the CCDA list. It's not one of these 12. We have the IHE Paramedicine Care Summary, which is a specialization of the IHE Medical Summary, which sounds like is widely supported. So that's good news. Then we also know that these document types are widely supported for systems to be able to receive them. We've also discussed, as we know, we can send discrete data, we can send unstructured data within all of these document types. They actually have one that's called Unstructured Document that's just simply a CDA header, metadata, and then whatever document you wanted to embed. What I'm wondering is, is there a place for these in this use case of EMS sending data to a hospital? I'm trying to figure out where to really focus our efforts. We know that these CCDA document types are already supported on the receiving end, but I would assume also that there's some stuff specific to EMS care that is not supported by these document types, which is why we have the HL7 EMS PCR document, and we have the IHE Paramedicine Care Summary, because there we can say, okay, yeah, here's the stuff that EMS does that's kind of unique to EMS. Let's make sure that that gets supported. These documents, I assume, would have some gaps, but maybe they would do some of the work for us. And I think that today, unstructured document is actually being used for sending EMS patient care reports. So, sorry, that's a really windy, long worded question there. Thoughts on this? Like, what should, what's being used today and what should we focus on going forward?
Today, between Image Trend and the City of Milwaukee Fire Department, all fire department EMS reports that are generated from Milwaukee Fire are coming into the Wishin network as a continuity of care document in the CCD version 3 format. It's not unstructured. So, I mean, that's what's happening today and has been live for like 18 months or so.
Okay. What have you found in terms of how well the scope of the CCD covers the information that EMS would be sharing with the hospital that would be important?
I think it's been useful. The utility is there. I've talked about it on this group many times. Patient demographics still is the linchpin in this. If the hospital encounter has John Jones and the EMS provider enters it as some variant of that, and we don't have enough information to make the match, that hospital cannot find that EMS report. So, I mean, we're making improvements to the system so that organizations can search not just by patient name, but by encounter date and time. So that's going to help. But there has to be some better communication, cooperation between the health system and EMS to make sure those demographics match. Otherwise, the utility is not there. That's going to be a continued issue if demographic matching is not improved.
Okay, yeah, and that's on our task force list for later this year to look at patient identification. But in terms of clinical content,
It's there.
Okay.
From what we've heard.
Okay. And Matt Becker said in the chat that discharge summaries like ED and hospital summaries and progress notes, which are generally ambulatory summaries, are probably 90 to 95% plus of all structured encounter documents exchanged today. So most systems receive them well. Okay, so discharge summaries and progress notes, those are very widely supported. Okay. And Matt, also, I believe No2 has been using unstructured document. Any comments on that?
I mean, it works. So I think, so what happens in the receiving system side, it generally goes to the place where they receive outside information and possibly attached to the patient as well. So it looks not that much different other than they'll be viewing a PDF instead of what they would see as a narrative of a structured document. At the end of the day, you can't parse information out of there without NLP and some fancy stuff like that. But at the same time, at least they're getting the information. It's in the right place and it's in front of them.
But Matt, wouldn't it be better for us to send the document with a LOINC code attached that identified what it was so that they could automatically file it?
Yes, and generally that should be required across the board, Catherine. And I don't think that's an optional thing. And that's something we should consider as we move forward with this.
Yeah. I mean, if we're setting the tone for the future, I would say that maybe we shouldn't encourage use of unstructured, because we know that the vendors can't, that you have to manually sort it then.
Yeah, and what I'm saying, Catherine, is like it'll be in the outside records activity of Care Everywhere, for example. It's just where you actually put that on the patient and stuff like that is.
Yeah.
And if folks do want to store that, that's critical. I think we're going to separate out what the physicians need in order to do their job, but at the same time, what the actual folks at the hospital needs in order to attach it to the patient and stuff like that. They're both important. So good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, hey, Josh, one quick comment along those lines. Mm-hmm. It really is the content that is sent by the generating system. So whether it's structured or unstructured is not a decision that, in this case, No2 would make, nor the method. That's decided by the receiving party. So what you're doing is you're attaching whatever is possible. We're totally agnostic. You can send a WAV file, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So the content is decided by the sending system. The method of receipt is decided by the receiving system. And then if you start looking at then what happens and why the unstructured document is a valuable tool on the receiving side is for release of information. So them being able to now send out, we get all kinds of inquiries around for legal reasons or medical reasons, and generating that release of information, then they have a record to send that's holistic and in its original format and appearance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like what the EMS crew signed off on, essentially.
Correct.
Yeah,
there'd be no missing data, whereas if they were ingesting data, they may not bring in all the structured data, but at least they're getting a report that they can provide as part of the release of information in the legal medical record.
Okay. Yeah, and I wanted to kind of come to your point of you said, the content is determined by the sender, the format is really determined by the receiver. And so I think that's what we've been talking about here is the hospitals. It sounds like really pretty much all of them would know what to do with an unstructured document and would accept an unstructured document. And as we move forward, then it sounds like we have some work to do to move to a more structured approach, that the hospitals would become comfortable with having more structured data.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a large part of it, because they have to, that's their choice on their side. But as long as we're doing what we're talking about here, which is sending them both, then they can decide what they want to do and not make it be dictated by EMS. EMS is providing everything that they could possibly need in the form and fashion they want it. And then they can decide what they put in the shredder and what they keep.
Yeah, great. And it gives them the opportunity to evolve their system over time, because once they're ready to grab the discrete data, it's there. Let's see, and Andrea mentioned that the discharge summary, number 5 here, inherits from is that from the IHE medical summary?
Yeah, if you would look at a hierarchy, you would look at a medical summary as you require only these 3 elements, like the medications, allergies, problems. And then the discharge summary says you also require this, and then they add more sections that you would either required if known or optionally include as a discharge summary. So yeah, it's a tighter version of a medical summary, and many of these other notes are also tighter versions of this medical summary too. So just for anyone who wants to understand how that relationship works.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think that's an important concept to be keeping in mind, these kind of hierarchies of inheritance or specialization, because those coming from the NEMSIS world just know that there's a NEMSIS document, and it doesn't have that sort of hierarchy. And Andrea, you had mentioned in the chat about transfer summary. Any other thoughts you might add about how that might apply to EMS sending data to a hospital?
Yeah, so I think it's mostly just like the cultural concept, I would say, of saying, is this a discharge summary or is this a transfer summary? The transfer summary is, I think, also inherits from discharge summary. So I think it includes some additional sections that may be more useful than some of the discharge summary pieces. But I think I would just have to look up the actual section differences. But when I was first doing the paramedicine care summary, a lot of the recommendation was use a transfer summary. And it tends to be like the first instinct of a lot of HL7 and IHE interaction is that's the first recommendation for a document type that would come in, it would resonate more with like the medical community as well as like the documentation of everything.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, now just to kind of throw the next wrench in, what's also being done today? HL7 version 2. So if we look at the SAFER technical resources, SAFER is doing HL7 v2 messages for both the alert phase and the file phase of the SAFER sequence. So ADT is admit, discharge, and transfer messages. ORU is an observation result, and MDM is medical document management. So narrative and EKGs are just kind of coming as documents. Vitals are coming as an observation result, and the pre-admit notification as an ADT. And then when they file the full patient care report, that's coming through as an MDM, a medical document management. So that's what SAFER's doing. Steve, you might be able to comment. I looked at at some stuff you presented on Wishen, and I also saw V2, ADT for the alert and MDM for the file. But it sounds like you've also been doing CDA as well.
Correct. So the HL7 V2 ADT message comes through, and it creates the encounter and establishes the relationship that subsequently the CCD or CCDA gets attached to. So the ADT is the creating the admit or the relation or the encounter visit, however you want to categorize that. And then the CCD will attach to that visit. And we're storing it along with all of our other CCDAs. And then there's in the encounter history, you would see like Advocate Aurora or Ascension encounters. You would see Milwaukee Fire Department as an encounter, and then be able to click into that EMS report that, again, hospitals and those trauma required reports. That's how those hospitals are able to get those EMS reports without waiting for a fax or something. So that's been the other thing you had up there, which is EKGs, which is contracted. So we will be working with EKGs once the hospital output or outcome data is available to the EMS. So I don't want to confuse the conversation if you don't want to go down there, but that bidirectional component is next. And that's what we're building as part of that SAFER model, is what the EMS will get out of the hospital.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense to do that next, to get some value back to EMS, and then work on getting more data from EMS to the hospital. So I'm not sure I'm clear. So we've got HL7V2 messages going, like the ADT message, to create that kind of event that you can then start attaching stuff to. And then the CCD, you said it was a continuity of care document, that's what the EMS patient care report becomes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
And then
that's how we're building it to be ingestible and displayed in that template.
Okay. And that's being transmitted then through or is that an XML document then, like an HL7 version 3? Okay.
Yeah. And the way we establish the connections, HL7 V2 is through SSL VPN connections, and then there's a HTTPS for the CCDA.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So then a mix of different HL7 versions going on. Okay.
Yeah. We got V2 and V3 happening.
Yeah. Okay. So I wonder if anyone else in the group has thoughts on the HL7 V2 stuff. So we know that it's being used today. We probably need to document it as like, this is what people are using. And then, I'm also wondering, like, where do we go in the future? Do we just say, yeah, this is what's being done today, but we encourage everything to be FHIR or HL7 V3, or any thoughts on that? Like, just where should our focuses be, I guess? What should we document? What should we promote?
So I think this should be a question a little bit, because in addition, so we have like the V2, ADT, and we have FHIR versions of doing these elements, right? And we know what's like you said, we know what's happening over mostly ADT and V2, and FHIR is still not done yet. But I think that there needs to be a little bit more investigation, because I know that some of these we also have things that are coming up from 360X that also incorporates these things in V2 messaging aspects as well. And so I think this is something that I think we need to get more feedback on from hospitals, and not just like, what are you doing between EMS and other pieces, but how do you take this information from other sources? So, do they do these types of pre-admission pieces if you're sending someone from one healthcare facility to the next? So like those transfers, and I think being more informed on what's being done already for, discharging a patient from one facility to the next, how they take care of those interactions might help inform us on this, outside of like what's being used for EMS today and what would we recommend. I would try to say that we would try to recommend as best as we can what is closely being done with hospitals and other healthcare systems if possible, because I think that would make the least amount of change. And if it's one over the other, I think it's going to be a little bit more informative to hear back from hospitals on that front.
So those of you, go ahead.
I just quickly, I would suggest providing options. Not all hospitals are created equal, like EMS. So if you say this is the only way that this information can be exchanged based on this standard, because the goal is ubiquity, I would expect, right? We want everybody to get in on exchanging information more seamlessly and more efficiently. By pigeonholing us, I mean, we're only going to get a percentage of full adoption.
Yeah, what else are we seeing from those of you who are, actively operating networks today?
What Steve is saying, that there's a multitude and not everyone's created equal. I agree. Options are the best.
Okay.
And I mean, with those options, you asked what we're seeing today, asking a vendor to say no to a project without saying no by way of the price tag on a project to implement something like this.
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing. Like, to implement something that's tens of thousands of dollars that really is using existing technology framework, it's just additional work. I mean, they're saying no without saying no. And that's extremely frustrating.
Yeah, I think it's important for, that since the EMS industry really is kind of at the ground floor in terms of this kind of interoperability, I think it's important for us to recognize what the hospitals and the rest of the system already support and bring ourselves to them saying, okay, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, for a multi-hospital system, I mean, to fund these projects, that money can be found in couch cushions. But a critical access hospital, or rural critical access hospital, where this is probably going to be really important, serving those high cost, high utilizer patients that EMS probably sees often, if not weekly, then, I mean, that's where, if in part to finding options is finding funding to help these organizations implement this.
Okay, let's circle back on this one. We're almost to the end of our long list of questions today. The question about sending small bits of information, like an activation or alert or ECGs or a set of vitals or a narrative. We saw how SAFER did that with HL7 V2. I'm curious, what thoughts are around. We've looked at lots of document types in CDA. How well is this concept supported in a CDA world? And also, if people have comments on how much it's needed, I appreciate those comments too. I assume it is necessary for EMS, for example, to send a rhythm strip to a hospital, like just little bits of data like that. But comments on that, and then just like, how well is that supported in CDA, and how do we need to do some work here to identify how these little bits of information would get sent? Any thoughts? I'm trying to think how I might rephrase that question a bit.
I think, Josh, just one piece. It is a frequent ask by the hospitals and is supported by the documentation systems, the EPCRs, to include it as part of a document so that they can see that strip. And typically, obviously, unstructured, so it's a picture of the strip. So yes, it's a frequent ask of the hospitals to have that included as part of the PCR that's delivered to them.
And they've been fine with it being part of the complete or mostly complete or incomplete PCR, like embedded in the document, as opposed to like, we just got this rhythm strip 10 seconds ago and we're sending it to the hospital.
Well, they love both, but I mean, they're, regardless, they do want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, do they need it in a more timely, like a real-time manner where we don't have a document ready for them yet, at least not a patient care report, but we do have a rhythm strip, or we do have a message to send them that says, hey, alert your stroke team, activate your stroke team, something like that. Or, we got our first set of vitals, here it is. Or is that maybe a level of maturity that's going to come later, that we need to solve lots of other things like patient identification first? All right, I guess was there a comment, someone?
This is Steve Rob. I would just we're not, we have the capability of notifying in some way through the system. Nobody said in route with the ADT, because that's essentially what's going to happen, is that ADT is going to trigger something to send more information about what's going on at the site or in transit to the hospital.
Okay.
Not today.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe this is something I should kind of document, put on in the parking lot. And maybe for now, we focus on the document, the patient care report document, and how we're getting that shared. And Rob said, I'm going to paraphrase what he said. I think we need to solve the patient identification piece first, and then the EKG can be sent in near real time via other methods. Okay, yeah. I guess there are other methods, but what would those be? Standardized methods, like using CDA, CCDA, or using some IHE profiles, like to send an ECG, for example?
Hey, Josh, this is Charles in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Generally, a lot of those devices have a built-in modem component that will send a strip to, the designated facility. That is not part of the documentation aspect at that time. And so it can be, sent directly and in a real-time fashion even before, they get the patient's name, they have cardiac arrest, John Doe, whatever, here's the strip that we're seeing, sending it to you now, and that exists in, I have to say, nearly all, 4-lead and 12-lead, and even some AEDs are getting to that point. So I think it's necessary and good because it needs to be incorporated into the documentation aspect at some point. But as like the real-time alert activation sort of thing for a team, and granted it's more specific to the EKG and stroke status, but I don't know. I think we can look at it as two different parts, just kind of a evolving best practice sort of thing.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that helps me understand it a lot better. So we've got the medical devices that have already implemented this ability to send data to a hospital. Amit, I know that lots of device manufacturers show up to your connectathons, so that's probably like kind of solved at, like that's something that they've been able to do for a while, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. Well, that's helpful because that may mean that we can kind of focus more on the other information that EMS is putting together, knowing that there is a mechanism in place for the devices to send their data, but then the rest of the patient care report would be looking at that. Okay. All right. So also, I don't know if we touched on FHIR enough today. The IHE Paramedicine Care Summary, the nice thing there is that it has both CDA and FHIR profiling. So if you want to send that over FHIR, then you've got a way to do it. As we've seen, we still see lots of HL7V2 stuff going on. Anything else that we should kind of be aware of about FHIR in terms of, as we document what EMS should be using to send this data? Anything that we kind of need to have on the radar for FHIR? Okay. All right. So lastly, as we wrap up, what resources are needed to help software transform NEMSIS data into the desired format? So let's say we go with the IHE Paramedicine Care Summary, or we go with an HL7 V2 ADT message, or all the other options that we talked about today. What resources do we need to develop that would be helpful to those who are implementing this stuff? That kind of things they can plug in to translate data or to understand how to structure the data. Any kind of requests on this front? Okay, Amit, let's talk about what members of this task force could potentially do to help drive the path forward with, especially the Paramedicine Care Summary, but really, in figuring out and kind of coalescing as a stakeholder group.
Yeah, well, so we've had this opportunity to get this group together, come and discuss what solutions are in play today, what's been missing, what we'd like to see go forward. And so I had another great conversation today. So thank you, everyone that participated in that. As you know and have heard from, Andrea Forquette is one of the main folks through IHE PCC as a co-chair driving forward some of the CMS work. What we haven't had and what we are looking for through this engagement with NEMSIS was that additional engagement of the EMS community. And so I think we're at the perfect time now where we can start to pull in interested parties, look at the existing PCS summary and get that updated, modernized, and in play. And among the things that we'd be looking for is a small group of people that may be interested in getting an overview of the PCS as it stands today. Some of the most recent comments, feedback that we've yet to incorporate into the latest version. And then as we've had folks support some of the testing, some of the interoperability workshops that we've put together, we would love to have a group of system developers, vendors come forward and test the updated PCS and get that moving through our process from trial implementation to final text. That's a multi-month type of engagement. However, it's something that in many standards efforts, usually one of the bottlenecks or delays is getting the right people at the table. And in absence of that, we wind up missing out on key information. And so across the board, all over standards activities, there's this need to update, modernize as our ecosystem has expanded. As recently as 5 years ago, folks were just looking at ambulatory and inpatient systems in context of certification. And now we know the world is much bigger. And there's different levers out there that can help us or the various communities get the information we need to clinicians and get the information back we need for outcomes and analytics as well. And so that's really the call to action that we have for this group. I think a lot of you have kind of self-identified as well in terms of some of the on-the-ground knowledge that you have. But what we're looking to do is assemble kind of a tiger team within this task force that we can accelerate the development of that IHE profile and get it out there and available for folks to use.
Great. So I think we're going to be touching on this when we meet face-to-face in a couple of weeks for the interoperability workshop in concert with the NEMSIS annual meeting coming up the end of this month, where we're going to put our heads together and say, okay, how do we drive some stuff forward based on all the conversations we've had? So we look forward to your continued input and support with this. Did we answer today's questions? Lisa, if you could put the link to the survey in the chat, thank you. You can take that quick 3-question survey there or snap the QR code here on the slide. We want to know how well did we cover these questions today in today's task force call and get your input on moving forward to the next topic. So really appreciate the feedback that we get from those post-call surveys. We usually only get like 3 or 4 people filling them out, but if you do have 30 seconds to do it today, it'd be really helpful. I took a bunch of notes today, and I'm really grateful for all the perspectives and input that so many of you brought today that really helped me to get some more clarity around all the standards that are out there right now, what's being used, what the hospitals can understand, especially the discussion we had about discrete data versus unstructured data. That was very interesting. Definitely learned a lot there. So thank you so much for all of that participation and information today. So next steps, take the task force call survey on your way out this morning or afternoon. Reminder, if you're not part of the email group, go over to Google Groups and look for the EMS Task Force and get signed up for that. We keep updating the GitHub repo and the wiki that's connected to it. So I've got some new content to add to the wiki based on our discussion today. We look forward to seeing a bunch of you at the NEMSIS annual meeting. We've got about 20 people, if I remember right, coming to the interoperability workshop on August 22nd. And then that'll be followed by the NEMSIS annual meeting on the 23rd and 24th near Park City, Utah. So during that interoperability workshop, it's a chance to be face-to-face in the same room with each other and put our heads together on putting together our plan for the next few months and really the next year on where we're going to take the interoperability efforts. Also, an update on the ONC annual meeting, which will be held on December 14th and 15th in Washington, D.C. There is going to be an interoperability summit. This will be the second summit. The first one was held in January of 2020. And this one has now landed on the afternoon of December 15th, so immediately following the end of the ONC annual meeting. So if you're planning on attending the ONC annual meeting, we would really encourage you to just make sure you book your return flight home to be late enough in the day to catch this Interoperability Summit 2.0, which I think we've tentatively scheduled for noon to 3:30 p.m. On that afternoon of the 15th. So looking forward to that too. All right, let's see. Amit, any parting thoughts for today?
Nope, I think you covered it all. I just wanted to say thanks again for everyone that was able to participate. It's the thick of summer, and I thought we had a great turnout and a great conversation. So appreciate it. And look forward to seeing folks at the NEMSIS annual meeting soon.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of the day.